But since it is 7:31, I'm going to go ahead and start. I am Carrie Enoch. I am the Campaign and Programs Director for the IgA Nephropathy Foundation of America. I am going to share my screen again and see. Can you see this now? Do you see the sponsor slide?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so first, I'm going to thank our sponsors very much because we would not be able to have this program without them. All of them have clinical trials that are currently enrolling or are about to be enrolling, whether it be phase 2 or phase 3. These people are working to find us medications that we do not have. So we are very, very grateful for them. I am the mom of a 16-year-old that has IgA nephropathy. I joined with Bonnie a couple years back because I wanted to help. I wanted to learn. This was the best way I knew how to really get sanity in my own world and get a grasp on something that I had no control over. I'm so excited to share my good news, and I'm going to try not to cry. In fact, I will say Bonnie was my very first phone call today after this happened, but my daughter had her nephrology checkup today, and she has been treatment resistant. We've done chemo, we do CellCept, we've done 1.5 years of prednisone, we've done every drug that there is. And today we were told she's in remission, which is amazing because 6 months ago she was spilling 4 grams of protein a day. And now out of nowhere, we've changed nothing in 2 years with her medication. She's just plugging along with her 24 pills a day. And she's in remission. So I just wanted to say, if it can happen to us, it can happen to any of you. We really, really need these drugs on the market because they are really going to be the thing that is going to help you. So if you have the ability to join a clinical trial, I would give anything for my daughter to be able to join a clinical trial. She's just too young. Please, please, please do. You are helping yourself. You are helping others. It is just a great way to have a minimal amount of control over something that we have no control over in our daily lives. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. So enough of my PSA. I'm going to introduce you to Stuart Miller, who is our Director of Strategic Planning. He is also the moderator and host of Spark 2020, and we are so blessed to have him on board with us. Stuart has been a kidney advocate for years. He works with the AAKP. He works with the National Kidney Foundation. Now he works with us, and we're so grateful. And on top of all of his advocating efforts, he also owns his own wholesale home decor business. So he's a busy dude. And we're grateful that he chose to spend some of his busy with us. So Stuart, there you go. It's all you.
Great. Thank you, Carrie. Just to give you a little bit of background on myself. I was diagnosed with IgA nephropathy in 2007. I was able to manage through diet and medications to avoid dialysis. And in 2018, I received a living donor transplant from my wife via a paired exchange program. And I really consider my kidney my second gift of life. And I'm glad to be able to be here and share with everybody and be able to help out the foundation. Couple of things tonight. I want to welcome all of our patients and caregivers that are out there have joined us for the virtual version of Spark 2020. Hopefully next year you can join us in Nashville for the real life, up and close and personal Spark 2021 in Nashville. A few housekeeping items to cover tonight before we start. First, everybody will remain on mute during the presentations. Second, if you have questions, please place them in the chat box, and all the questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Tonight, we're going to hear from some of our own IgA and nephropathy warriors. It would be really interesting to hear their stories and to listen and learn from their real-life experiences. Our first speaker tonight is Giselle Delgado. Gisela is the Director of Brand Marketing and Communications for the IgA Nephropathy Foundation. She was diagnosed with IgA nephropathy at the age of 14, and in February of 2019, Gisela had a preemptive transplant. Her background in marketing and her life experiences as a transplant patient make her an ideal speaker for tonight's topic, how to find a donor through social media and marketing. Please welcome Gisela.
Hey guys, I just need someone to give me access to share my screen.
Was it not letting you?
Let's see. No, now it is. Let's go to. All right. Are we all good here?
Yep.
We are.
All right. Awesome. Thank you for that introduction, Stuart. I appreciate it. First and foremost, thank you everyone for joining. I know that myself, I'm suffering from virtual meeting fatigue. I'm in virtual meetings all day. So I appreciate you all taking time on this Wednesday evening to join us, and hopefully you will find it beneficial. I also want to start off by saying that I acknowledge everyone's feelings, and I know that it's very easy for me to talk about this journey and what you can do because I have been through it. But when you're in it, there's some acceptance that you're going through. So all of your feelings are valid, and I want you to know that I acknowledge them, and I don't think any of this is easy, but hopefully this can help. So today's session topic that I'm going to cover is how to find a donor through social media and marketing. And I think those are two words that scare a lot of people. So why don't we just go to say that we're just going to find a donor through people. A little bit about me. I was born in 1981. In 1994, I was diagnosed with IgA nephropathy via kidney biopsy. Many years later, in 2011, was when I actually started to have more symptoms and started rapidly approaching sort of next stage of actually starting to be able to get into some sort of treatment for IgA nephropathy. As you know, that you cannot, it's an untreatable disease, so it's a lot of cocktails. But I managed to go a long time without really having any severe symptoms that were impacting my life. In 2017, I did approach kidney failure, and I was put on the list for transplant, the UNOS list. And in 2019, I received a preemptive transplant, which means that I was able to get a transplant from a living donor before the need for dialysis. The transplant process is very overwhelming. This doodle is, I know how a lot of us feel. You go from diagnosis to all the labs, all the testing, the poking, trying to figure out the right cocktail to treat your disease. And I think this is true for almost any kidney disease. To wait, do I need Medicare? Do I have insurance? What's the next step for me? And typically it's either dialysis or transplant. But the truth is you don't necessarily need to go on dialysis. And if possible, we want to try to avoid that. And if you are approaching kidney failure, is how can we get you to find your donor? When you're suffering from kidney failure and kidney disease, I think a lot of us do this where we try to downplay it. We don't want to play victim, and you're tired. I mean, there's a level of tiredness that exists when you're going through kidney failure that I think it should have its own definition. The brain fog, the, just tricking yourself to wake up to go brush your teeth. And when people ask you how you're doing, you might just say you're tired. And I want you to know that that is a real valid feeling. And I think that came up with a lot of us. And finding a kidney donor is not something that you can do on your own. You need to find people, and you need help. And the first thing to acknowledge, I would say, is that every single person you know has the ability to help share your story. And I use these terms very carefully because sharing your story does not mean that every single person could be your donor. They have the potential to be your donor, but every single person at the very least could share your story, because living donation is not for everyone, and everyone has their own personal reasons why they might not feel comfortable going through the testing, and that's okay. What you want to do is make it impossible for anyone who knows you or knows someone that knows you or vaguely knows about you to not know that you are in need. So you have to find your person, but you have to find your people. And what I mean by that is, it's not just the people who are around you today. Like literally take a couple of minutes and think about, where do you work? Where you went to school? If you're married, where does your spouse work? Where did your spouse go to school? Any communities that you're a part of? You never know who might be willing to help, and it could come from the most unlikely person. And again, it's not just about people who are willing to get tested, but people who are willing to share your story, because those two are very connected. You need to find a squad. Unlike other programs where people are looking for matches, like the Be the Match program, where you're looking for bone marrow and the hospital is very active and you have people that are actively searching for your donor. When you are looking for a kidney donor, you have to do the work yourself. And back to that original meme there of someone just saying, I'm tired, I'm tired. It's not something I recommend you try to do on your own. You need at least one person. And if you don't have one person that you feel like that can help you, please reach out to me and I will be the one person and I will find more people to help you, because together we can do this. And now you say, well, how do I find people and share my story? So social media, we have Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you don't know how to use any of those, that's okay. There's email, there's text messaging, there's a lot of free website blog tools that you can use. And one of my personal favorite tools that's free and available for anyone is called Adobe Spark. Not related to this Spark session at all. It just happens to have the same name, but it's a free program for creating social media marketing content. And anyone can download it and you can create some templates. You want to create content that's digestible and looks good, and you don't have to worry about whether or not you're an artist. The best way for me to show you this, I think, is to pull an example of something that you can create. And this is a real example, and I know to all of us in the IgA Nephropathy Foundation, this is our very own Alex Berrios, who is in current need of a kidney transplant. And when I say share your story, what you want to do is pull together the who, what, where, when, why, how. And this is important, and you want to try to have it all in one place. So I definitely want to call out that it's okay if you don't have a website. That's okay. It's okay if you don't like using Facebook. That's okay. You can type all of this information in a Word document. You can write it out on a piece of paper and take a picture of it. The main messaging here is that I want to know, who is this person? What am I looking at? What exactly is happening here? Where is it going to happen? When could it possibly happen? Why and how? And in this, I'll just go back here for a second. I made a bit.ly link here. If you copy and paste this, you can actually go to this page and copy and paste it. It's really important to get information from trusted resources in terms of, if you're going to talk about living donation, don't feel like you have to make up the information. There's plenty of documentation out there, and just keep it all in one place. Again, I said, you're like, websites kind of scare me, Facebook is scary. Here's an example of just an email, Word document rather, where you tell your story. And the one thing for sure I want you guys to focus on is that don't feel bad about oversharing. At the end of the day, you only need one person to come forward and actually be that person that's going to save your life. But we want to cast a really large net. And the way we remember things is consistency and repetition. So in my example, to make it easy for people to share my story, I had an email address, I had my URL for Facebook and Instagram, and a website, all said Kidney for Gisela, so that everyone could remember it. And I'm going to say why that's important, because if you go back to my timeline, in 2017, when I realized that I was going to need a transplant, I started a blog. And I called it Chronic Habichuelas, because I thought that was really funny, because it means bad kidneys. And it was a blog, and I was sharing my story every day. But no one could remember that. No one could spell it. And even if you kind of remembered it, you probably wouldn't end up at the right place. So when I ended up meeting my own kidney champion, she told me we needed to make it very clear and concise so that people could find me easily and be able to easily share the information. So that's where I'm teaching you to sort of learn from my mistakes. I love humor. I don't like to be too serious. It's super weird to do this presentation and it's like super silent and I'm like yelling in my kitchen without any sort of reaction from people. So you want to have empathy. You want people to be able to relate to you. And while humor is important, at the end of the day, the most important thing is for people to know that you need help. And when they want to know how they can help you, it's to share your story. I'm showing a lot of examples because I feel like when I say share my story, people focus on the highly creative pieces. And I want to show that text messages, emails also work. This is an email that I sent out. This was in January of 2019. Short and sweet, to the point. I have a serious favor to ask you. It's about as serious as I get. What I did in this email, I would attach a couple of photos of myself and then remind people of my hashtag and also Facebook and Instagram. Here are some images that I supplied. It's important, I think, to show who you are, that you look like everyone else. And I think we all know that as a kidney disease patient, it's a silent disease. You look and feel great, but inside you feel pretty crappy. This was probably about, these photos were probably about 3 to 4 months before I had my transplant. Wasn't feeling great. We'll talk about casting the widest net possible and what that means. Again, you want to go public. I see a lot of people focus just on their immediate family and friends, and you want to cast the widest net possible because you don't know where that person is that's going to have the best kidney match for you. And what I mean by, cast the widest net is, again, think about where you work, where your friends work. I would suggest putting together a team of 5 people from different parts of your life. So family, maybe friends from your neighborhood, friends from work, friends from church, just so that you can all divide and conquer to spread your message, so that we can just try to make sure that we cast that really large net. And don't beat yourself up. What works for one person may not work for another person, and that can get frustrating. And those are some of the things I think you see sometimes on social media, where you see that somebody did something, they received a kidney right away, and you're wondering, well, why isn't that working for me? I could do the same thing. I don't have the answer for that. When I figure it out, I promise I will share it. What's the secret sauce? What makes someone react? But I just encourage you all to think different. This is one of the best campaigns I think that was ever done by Apple, just as a marketing campaign, of all people who really changed the world by thinking different. And this even leads into follows up from Stuart's session on being a kidney advocate and how one person can truly make a difference. Continuing on how you can think different, I met Rob Leibowitz at the Big Ask Big Give session that was hosted at my hospital. He was the guy who went famous for wearing a t-shirt in Disney World and ended up receiving his living kidney donor. And I was like, I know how to make a t-shirt. I'll make a t-shirt. That's me on the bottom, meeting him. And so I decided to make a couple of t-shirts, again, with my information on the back. Not much happened from that experience for me, but I tried it. If you do some Google searching, there was, and I saw that someone else had done this sort of like very more grassroots, what we call guerrilla marketing, AKA lemonade stand of sorts. You just have a bunch of lifesavers with like a little card and you're handing it out and you're saying, have a lifesaver, be a lifesaver. And then maybe there's a little card attached with information on how someone could potentially reach out and be your donor. Here's an example of a card that I had. And when I say a card, this is a business card. This was a 2x3. It's very short, but within 2 seconds of looking at this, you know exactly what needs to happen. You know exactly what you could potentially do to help. And I had 100 of these printed out and I gave them out to all of my friends. They left them in bars and Ubers, in restaurants, on the subway, on community boards. You can easily walk around with 50 of these in your pocket So this is where I talk about, like, again, arming and finding your people, just ways to share your message. You still want to just be consistent, have the right information on there. For me, I had a website, Kidney for Gisela, but if you have a Facebook page, if you have a dedicated telephone number, a hashtag, you just want to make sure it's all rolling up into the same place. Here's some more examples of flyers that I made. We put these flyers everywhere, and I mean everywhere. Some people took pictures of these flyers, and then that's what ended up on social media, and it would somehow ended up getting hashtagged back to me. And I know what you're thinking. This is all great. You know how to design things. You're a marketing professional. You make everything look great. Well, if you're not a marketing professional and you're scared by the word, but you still want to share your message, again, we're just going to think differently, and you have to use what you got. I have a really cute dog that has perpetual sad face. It's really good at lurking on people's emotions and getting likes and comments and shares. He is a rescue. And when we posted this image, the rescue group that he was from asked if they could repost it. All of a sudden, this image was like viral amongst the dog loving community. And I think, you know, it probably would not have worked with maybe any dog. I'm going to give Rhesus a lot of credit for this. But, you know, just think differently. Use what you got. And again, if you're like, oh, well, I would have never thought about that. I've seen a lot of examples of the ways that you just have to do what feels comfortable to you. And I would just say there is no wrong way to go about this. There is nothing, there's nothing like, what if I do that? That's stupid. No one will like it. My advice, and again, just in my opinion, the worst thing that could happen is that literally nothing happens and you'd be right where you are. The best thing that could happen is, even if it was one person that took a picture of it and shared that information, that could be one step closer to you getting that kidney that you needed. Lawn signs, you know, someone actually just worrying. This man here in the bottom right just had a quick sign with a number: my wife needs a kidney with the blood type, call me at this number. Walking around New York City. You have cute kids. I think your children or your family holding up a sign, a handmade sign that says what needs to happen, that to me is the most heartfelt call to action, because it makes it super relatable. And I think a lot of people don't realize that when you have kidney disease, you're suffering, and there's just this sort of, it can seem unrelatable because they can't relate to your disease because they don't know what it's like for your suffering. But what they can relate to is you being a person that's a part of a family. You also have to focus on what you can actually control. And I don't know how many people on this call are in the transplant process, but it's very overwhelming. And especially because you have no transparency and you don't know if what you're doing is necessarily working because of the privacy laws with HIPAA. And for those of you who don't know, typically what happens as you start to advocate on your own behalf, or your friends and family do, to get you a living donor, they apply. Maybe they'll tell you they applied. Maybe they won't. Maybe they tell you they passed the first test, but then you don't hear from them after that. You don't know what is going on. And it can feel really, you're like, what happened? Did I do something? Did they get scared? Did they no longer want to help me? From personal experience, I can tell you that I had many people get tested, tell me they were getting tested, get diagnosed with their own things. Really quickly, I can tell you 3 people off the top of my head. One person, a good friend of mine, found out that she was pregnant. And she found out super early, because when you go to get tested, you get the best physical of your life. And through the blood work, she found out she was pregnant before she would have through a pregnancy test. I had another good friend, very healthy young male, black belt jiu-jitsu, found out that his kidneys were connected. It's called U-shaped kidney. So you can't donate a kidney if your kidneys cannot separate. I had someone was diagnosed as pre-diabetic. Someone else diagnosed, sort of like really wanting them to focus on their mental health, someone that maybe was doing it for the wrong reasons that we later spoke about. So there's a lot of reasons why people may not go through it, but don't focus on that. All you can do is just keep advocating on your behalf. And like I said, don't feel like you're wasting people's time. It's not a waste of time, it's your life. If you post every single day and no one is responding, don't think that no one is responding. I guarantee you that people are watching. I felt sort of helpless at times, like I was unseen. And I know that that feels like crap, but I will say as you sort of move forward, just know that the right kidney that's meant for you is going to find you. And do not stop sharing your story until you're scheduled for surgery, because anything can happen along the way. I use this sort of vortex to allude to the time suck that kind of you feels like you're in and you just don't know what's happening. You can't focus on what you can't control. You really have to let it go. And I know that's really hard for me. I'm a project manager sort of by trade. So not knowing who and when was getting tested and what was happening was super frustrating for me. But what you can do is if you're going forward and you have a kidney campaign, and if you want to know if what you're doing is actually working, you can talk to your transplant coordinator and ask if they will at least tell you, yeah, we've had some people inquire. They won't tell you how many, but at least you know that what you're doing is working, and you can try different things to get different reactions. And to make sure that you're putting your effort into the right thing. Like if you tried wearing t-shirts and t-shirts didn't work, maybe the next week you hand out flyers, and then you just check in with your transplant center and say, hey, have we had any movement? Because they won't call you, because that's just the way the process works. And that is super frustrating, I know. The last thing, sort of, you have to follow the fear. It's scary to be vulnerable and to let people know that you're hurting. You don't want people to, like for me, I didn't want anyone to come forward to donate because it was an emotional trigger for them. I wanted anyone who wanted to come forward to know exactly what they were getting into. I wanted them to know what, like, did they speak to their family? And I just kept saying, I'm just going to keep sharing my story, letting people know that they can help me, but don't get so focused on, I need to solve this on my own. If you were in a house, and I use this analogy and it's a little dramatic, but I think that spoonies, sort of anyone who's like suffering from a chronic illness, we sort of downplay our illness, especially if we look okay. If you were in a house and the house was on fire, you wouldn't gently open up the window slightly and ask or whisper, excuse me, would you mind calling the fire department? You'd be screaming out the window for help. You need to find a way to, quote unquote, scream for help through the realm of sharing your story and allowing others to really help you. I know that's a lot of information, and this deck will definitely be shared. And I'm happy to talk more about my personal story, but I really want to make sure I have room to talk through people's personal questions regarding like any of these sort of tools. And the most important thing I want you all to know, anyone here who is looking for some transplant help, either personally for someone they love, is that you're not alone. There are plenty of people that have been through this process, and there's the ups and downs, and I'm hoping that we can help you learn from it. I'm very grateful, and I don't take for granted any day that passes that I am blessed in many ways. And I know that my story is not the common story. I know that a lot of people suffer. But my hope and my goal is that by somehow sharing how you can share your story, we can find more people who are willing to donate and find more ways to share your story so that everyone can get that second chance at life. And that's all I got for you.
Great, thanks, Gisela. I think there's a reason why the National Kidney Foundation calls it the big ask. It's a really hard question. And speaking from my own personal experience, it's really tough. And I think we're very lucky to have someone like Gisela in our organization who's willing to share, who's willing to help. So if anybody has or needs help, I know she's always willing to help out. Feel free to reach out and touch base with her, and she'll be happy to help you out and share her story even more. Next up on our list, we have a panel. We've assembled a panel of transplant patients that all have IgA nephropathy, and they're going to share their stories. And we'll answer take some questions from the audience, and hopefully you can learn from their experiences. And as a transplant patient myself, I know everybody has a different path.
Anyway, he dropped from 160 over 105, and then it went to 130 over 90, and then it went to 100 over like 70 or 60. So it kept on dropping. So when he was sitting, it was.
Okay, we're going to first start off our panel with Jody Morse. Jody, it's all yours.
Hi, I'm Jody Morse. Some of you might know me as the moderator of the IgA group. My story begins when I was 8 years old. That's when I noticed blood in my urine for the very first time. My pediatrician told my parents that was normal. I was fine. Obviously, I wasn't fine. So 18 years, several doctors, and a kidney biopsy later, I was diagnosed with IgA. My kidneys were functioning at 98% at the time, and I was spilling about 5 grams of protein a day. I was 26, and my nephrologist told me that I was probably going to need a transplant by the time I was 40. So I was 26, and fast forward to a few days after my 29th birthday, I began emergency dialysis. And as Gisela said, it's the most overwhelming, most frustrating process ever. For me, the hardest part, though, was looking for a donor. Emotionally, I couldn't bring myself to ask anybody face-to-face for a kidney. I couldn't. I couldn't talk about it, even to my closest friends. So I turned to Facebook. My sister made a page, and we advertised my need for a living donor. We put the benefits of living donation. We put all the details on how to get tested. I was fortunate because the third person who got tested, who was an online friend at the time, became my donor. So we met for the very first time in the OR at Columbia Presbyterian in 2016. It was the best gift that I was ever given, and I don't take it for granted for a day. And I just want to say, if you're going through the process, just be proactive, stay hopeful. Somebody will donate.
Great, thanks, Jody. Next up is Brandy Webster. Brandy?
Hi guys, thanks Stuart. I'm Brandy. I was diagnosed with IgA nephropathy when I was 14 years old, same as Gisela, same as a lot of the people that I know. I let it go. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any support, no resources. I had never met anybody else with the same disease as me. I felt alone. I felt lost. And then I found out when I was 28 that my kidneys were failing and I would need a kidney transplant. And I had no idea where to even begin. I was fortunate enough to have a living donor, my wife, Lindsay, who is here in the chat with us today. And she graciously stepped forward so that I could avoid doing dialysis, so that the expectancy of my graft would last longer. And to this day, I'm so grateful, but I don't think I could have done it, found a way to ask. I had nowhere to go. So I'm very grateful that Lindsay stepped forward and was able to donate a kidney to me. I am now the director of volunteer programs for the IgA Nephropathy Foundation, and I'm constantly looking for people to pair up with other people to help them through so that they don't have to experience the same fears that I felt. That's all I've got.
Great, thanks, Brandy. And next up is Karen Smiley.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you all virtually. I'll share my story a little bit. So I was originally misdiagnosed at age 29 as a urinary infection. There was blood in my urine after I came back from a trip, and I had small amount of protein in my urine. And this went on for a while without them going any further in testing. They just continued to tell me that it was just a lingering urinary infection, which is obviously looking back ridiculous. But at the time, not knowing any better, I listened to them, and my blood pressure went up at some point later on from that. And then it was still not looked into. But fast forward to, I was, I got married, got pregnant, everything's still kind of going on. I have a little bit of protein, a little bit of blood in my urine. They're just thinking that it's me, it's become my norm. And about halfway through my pregnancy, the protein spiked up to crazy amounts. It was 15,000 at one point, which for those of you that have protein and know that, that's very high. And the sad part was the doctor at the time told me that I should end my pregnancy because they didn't know what was going on. They thought it might have been this IgA unknown condition, but weren't sure. So they didn't want to do the biopsy. I obviously did not follow their orders, and the pregnancy I continued through and ended up having my child totally fine, things there, and protein went down to normal. About a year later, after my son's birthday party, had my labs done. This is a normal check, and my protein was back up again. So at that point, I was able to convince the doctor, like, look, we need to figure out what really is going on here. Get me an answer. And I got biopsied, and that's where they found that I have, IgA nephropathy at that point. So at that point, then it was, here's your prednisone, your 60 milligrams a day for 6 months. And at the end of 6 months, you will be magically all better and you will have no more IgA. That didn't happen for me. I got every single side effect known to man with prednisone, and blood pressure kept going higher. Labs were getting worse and worse. I went to University of Pennsylvania to get a second opinion, let him know my background. And just in that conversation, he said, I can't give you a different drug or a magical pill to fix this. He's like, I don't want to be the one to tell you, but without doing anything, I feel like your kidneys have already failed. And of course, devastated. It was like, wait, I'm looking for a different pill that can help me, things like that. And they did do their own biopsy, did do their own 100 million labs and things like that, and did confirm that I was, in fact, actually not even worth staying on prednisone because my kidneys were already at like 10%. So fast forward through that process, I did have to start dialysis relatively quickly once that happened. I didn't even know where to turn, wasn't even able to think of like a transplant. It was more just, how do I survive the day that I've been given this news? So I understand anybody in that situation, just it hits you and you don't even know where to turn. And I had to get training for dialysis. I was fortunate enough to do peritoneal dialysis. And, if you're in that situation, I'd be happy to talk to anybody, that has questions or anything about that, because it's a very easy process for me compared to the other sources of getting dialysis, but it's still not an easy thing to go through. And it's still, you don't know, even though you're told it's temporary, you don't know when that kidney is going to, become available for, and you don't know how to get it. Once I started dialysis, I was then able to be like, okay, now I can get my brain in like order to know I need to find someone where I can get a transplant. And living donor, of course, I was told by everybody was the best option. So I told all my friends, all my family, I did put some information on Facebook, looking at the different marketing materials that Gisela shared. Like, I wish I had that stuff, but I also know that the way I did it, I got a kidney. So, like she said, the right kidney became my kidney. I was on dialysis for about 2 years. And towards the end of that process, my very close youth group, actual girl, so I was youth group leader, and she was one of my girls in my small group. She was going through testing. I knew about it, but everything that could go wrong with her and her situation just kept going wrong, and things just kept getting delayed. And I just kept thinking it's not going to happen, and who's it going to be and how. And the next thing you know, she out of nowhere got approved and called me. The hospital called me and we had our surgery in February of 2015. After that, felt amazing. Things were great. I did biopsy at 3 months, 6 months. Everything was clear. And then at a year, the biopsy showed that the IgA did move into my new kidney. So, of course, I was at that point devastated. You know, what do we do? And the only suggestion and the only thing, as much as I pushed back on it, was they added in prednisone, a very small dose, but they added that in thinking that that would help prevent the IgA from advancing. Most recently, because I'm now 5 years post-transplant, the IgA, of course, is there. I had a biopsy last year, and it's still there. It's not advancing, you know, anywhere crazy, but my creatinine did jump up because they put me on losartan to stop the protein or try to limit the protein from leaking from my kidney. So right now I'm in the stage of I'm post-transplant. I'm healthy in every other way, but I do deal every time I have to get labs with the fear of am I advancing? You know, is this IgA back to advancing? And every time I see my lab, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is like where I started how many years ago, and what does this mean this time? So, you know, anybody that has any questions about my story or just, you know, in general, wants someone to talk to through it, I'm here for anybody that needs that. And that's my story.
Thank you, Karen. It's a story with a good ending so far. So hopefully your IgA will stay in remission for a while.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Last but not least in the cleanup hitter is Gisela Delgado. Gisela.
All right. Hi. Still waiting for people to answer me, but I'm not used to this virtual. I'm like, no one. I got no one. Anyways, also big shout out to Rhoda. Rhoda was my kidney champion. She's lighting up the chats. She's going to give me a report card, I'm sure, based on my presentation. But you only need one person to really motivate you. And I would say that Rhoda definitely saved my life by helping me with a strategy. So I want to give her a big shout out. And I would catch a grenade for Rhoda in a heartbeat because she is a walking angel on earth. And everything that she's saying in there, I promise I will share with you because it's all in my documentation on how you can share your story. I want her to be proud of me. So most of you know my story, bits and pieces, but I will try to do a quick summary here. I was diagnosed at the age of 14 with IgA nephropathy. It took about 6 months to be diagnosed. The first signs were blood in my urine, and then lots of testing, lots of ultrasounds. Finally, upon getting a kidney biopsy, I was diagnosed with the disease. At the time, this is 1994, I remember doctor saying, you know, there's this thing, it's like Berger's disease. It's a very slow progressing chronic kidney disease. Probably what will happen is in about 20 to 25 years, you'll have kidney failure. There's not much we can do for you right now, but we'll just monitor. I would just have her monitored. Thankfully, I was able to have a great adolescence, I would say. I wasn't really impacted. Was able to go to college, live my life, be wild, be free. And then in 2011 is really where my disease sort of had a flare up. And from that flare up, reconfirm my diagnosis because it had been so long with another kidney biopsy. And then from there, it goes through the trying to get treatment, which is why this foundation is also so important, is that there is no cure or treatment for IgA nephropathy. And even getting a kidney transplant is a type of treatment. And as you can see, even in the chats, like there is a risk that the IgA can come back in your transplanted kidney. You know, my story is I had someone help me find my donor. Also, one day this will be a great Lifetime movie, is that my brother ended up being my living kidney donor. We were estranged and hadn't spoken in about 2 or 3 years. And though I had several people come through in 1 week, I had 3 people come through as great matches. They called me 3 out of 6 matches. And then my brother called me and told me he was a match. And then all of a sudden we were scheduled for surgery 2 weeks later. So you're hearing it first here, but I guarantee you it's going to be in Lifetime one day. And you'll hear all the gossip of everything that happened in between there.
We can say we knew you when then, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks, Gisela, for sharing. Like I said earlier, I think everybody's story, everybody takes a slightly different path, you know, to transplantation. it's a difficult journey for anyone. And I think that it's great for you guys to share your stories, and hopefully the people on the webinar can learn from your experiences and benefit from what you had to say. We have a couple of questions we'd like to address the panel, and you guys feel free to answer as many or as little as you'd like, and what the ones that apply to you. First off, someone's asked about the cost of a transplant. Did anybody experience any issues with financial needs before a transplant, or have any consequences because of the cost of a transplant?
I'd be happy to take this answer.
Sure, go ahead, Brandy.
So we were fortunate enough that, because the way that it is generally set up is that the recipient is responsible for covering the fees of the donor. But with my wife being the donor, we would have had to foot the bill for both of us. But fortunately, we had a coordinator. It was a financial aid coordinator that would meet with us previous to transplant and ensure that everything was set up, that we had Medicare to cover. She encouraged us to begin a fundraiser. She double checked that we had insurance as well as backup insurance for any sort of coverage that needed to be done. The hospitals that you're working with should be assisting you in finding, because they wanted us to save $10,000. They wanted us to come up with $10,000 up front, which seemed like an impossible feat. But it is very possible through the right kind of fundraising efforts. As soon as you find out, if you're starting out in your transplant journey, that you're going to need a transplant, it's important to set up and get the word out that now that you've been diagnosed, you also need to foot some of the bill. Fortunately, we had very little cost. We did not need $10,000. We actually needed less than $1,000, which was very fortunate on our part. So there are options and there are resources. So be sure you're talking it out with your coordinators.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add is that for viewers who don't know, once you are on dialysis or you become a transplant recipient, you are automatically qualified for Medicare. So that can help offset some of the costs as well. Of all the people who've had transplants, how many have had IgA transplanted in the new transplanted kidney?
I'll take that one. So yes, I do. I have IgA in my new transplanted kidney. Like I said in the story, I did right after transplant. They do all of the lab work and stuff like that. Everything was perfectly fine. At 3 months, everything was fine. The 6-month biopsy, again, everything was perfectly normal. My creatinine number was 0.89 from the time I had transplant until the year. So it was perfect. The day before I was transplanted, I was up to 6.9. That was my highest creatinine number. And then with at the 1-year biopsy, they did that and they had the staining done and things. And that's where it came back showing that I had the signs of it starting. So that's where right away, as soon as they saw any signs of it, and they did give me the heads up because they knew my hatred, personal hatred of prednisone, just because of all it did to me back when I had it, the high doses. But that was where they said, we have to force you to do some level of prednisone because that's going to be, a helper. But now in time, now I've had losartan added to try to now combat that protein loss. So.
Is there anybody else on the panel that has IgA in their transplanted kidney? No. Okay. Did anybody have any? Yeah.
Stuart, if I could get a quick little comment. Hi, I'm Bonnie, co-founder along with my husband of the foundation. I did want to add that a previous webinar that we had, I believe it was the first one with Dr. Bruce Gillian, he said the statistics were that when you had a transplant, 50% of the patients had reoccurrence. It did not mean end stage in the recurrence. So we can find out those numbers. If somebody wants to know, email me at bonnie@igan.org and I'll get a more clarifying answer for you. But that was 50% of all transplants with IgA had a 50% reoccurrence but not end stage. So again, reach out to me.
Great. Thanks, Bonnie.
To
Did anybody
piggyback
have a
off that,
rejection?
I'm sorry, Stuart, to piggyback off that, they're doing research right now on how to figure out before you get the kidney on whether they think that it will come back in that kidney, if that makes sense. They've got a doctor that is working right now specifically on that research alone. That's what his whole job is. So it's pretty good news. Hopefully they'll find something fast, because if we could prevent it from coming back, that would be ideal.
That would be great. Did anybody have a rejection or any complications from the transplant?
I had probably what was more scary than the transplant itself. I could talk about that. And I know that people that go through dialysis suffer through this, but I think I was in the hospital for 5 days, and I came home. I was home maybe for 3 days. And when you get your new kidney, your certified pre-owned, because it's not new, not yet anyways, there's a stent that's connecting your new kidney to your bladder. And I was bleeding nonstop. And I mean, when I left the hospital, I was still bleeding very heavily. And they're like, "That's fine, that'll stop." And I'm like, "Okay, you're sending me home, sure." And what happened was the blood, it clots. And I was unable to pass urine. And that was very scary. That was actually, I'd never experienced that. You know, you go to use the restroom and nothing's happening, but you have that pressure. It ended up being nothing too major. They put the catheter in. They just had to like flush out the line a bit. But that was a little scary for me, because it's like something that's so natural, and to not be able to do it, it freaked me out. I wasn't even thinking about the fact that I knew that I was bleeding. I was thinking about there's something not working with my transplant. So thankfully it ended up being something very easy, but it was pretty scary.
I had a rejection 3 weeks after my transplant, and the stay in the hospital was longer for my rejection than it was for my kidney transplant. And, you know, it's a little scary, you know, 3 weeks after you get this gift, to know that it may be in danger, and the process and the treatment they give you for rejection is pretty nasty stuff. And you can only get it twice in your lifetime. So you better make sure that when they use it judiciously. And it really kind of set my recovery back almost 6 months initially. So luckily everything's fine now, but that was something that I wouldn't want to go through again. We have a question. Is everybody able to work up until their transplant, and what was their recovery like as far as going back to work?
I'll jump in. So I worked up until the day before my surgery. I was fortunate enough to work with a company that even when I was doing dialysis, I would work on my computer from dialysis when I was in training, I should say, until I actually was done the training and things like that. So the employer, I let them know, actually, because I got the job, this new job I got was the day after I got the news that I was going to need to do dialysis and, you know, look to getting a transplant. So I was actually starting the new job that next day. So I was fortunate enough to be able to work with a company that still hired me and, you know, worked with me through the process. And then, like I said, the day before I got all my lab testing done and things like that, actually with my donor, we did it together because I know her and everything, and then got the surgery. After the surgery, that next morning, I felt amazing. It's just, you don't realize how bad you were feeling until like that next morning you wake up. I mean, I was sitting up in the chair, and when my husband came to visit, he was shocked. And then, you know, went home, you have a 3-month recovery, you know, with work and things like that. That's what your doctors want you to have. But I did go back like part-time working from home the last month of that, because I really was feeling great.
Yeah, and I think the recovery is a little different for people who have been on dialysis versus those who had a preemptive transplant. You know, and you talk to dialysis patients, and it's a very difficult way to live. And so just emotionally to be able to get off that machine and know that the next day you're going to be in better shape, I think helps as well. It's different for people who have, you know, luckily have not been on dialysis, but, you know, are just getting a preemptive transplant. let's talk about drugs for a second. Anybody have any good or bad experience with the immunosuppressant drugs? Anything that's side effects that they're experiencing or things that to watch out for as you take your immunosuppressants?
I'd be happy to talk about medications.
Okay.
All right. So when I first had my transplant, they put you on the standard high dose of prednisone, and then they also start you on tacrolimus, better known as Prograf, and then they also give you Myfortic. And I actually had an allergic reaction to Myfortic, which made me incredibly ill. And I spent, I returned to the hospital multiple times within the first month after my kidney transplant trying to figure out what was going on. And once they figured it out, they were able to give me a different concoction. Today I take Envarsus, which is 24-hour extended release Prograf tacrolimus, which is the primary drug that they use to prevent organ rejection. And they also gave me what's called Zortris, which they primarily use for liver transplant recipients instead of kidney transplant recipients, but my body took better to it. And after 2 years from my transplant, I was able to stop taking prednisone because I've had no issues of rejection. I have had no issues of recurrent IgA so far, fortunately. And, it takes a long time to really figure out what the right dose is, what that balance of keeping you in the gray area is, and not too much that it makes you sick, but not too little to make sure that you lose your kidney. It took 2 years to really find the right mix for me. My hair fell out. I gained weight quickly. I slept a lot, and then I couldn't sleep because they gave me too much, and so I developed insomnia. You really go through a lot of changes, but your body will normalize. I feel great today. My GFR is 88. I'm going to answer this question from Leah. I did have to fight. I had to fight really, really hard, and I had to sign a contract that acknowledged that they told me the risks of stopping prednisone. But the risks of stopping prednisone, while they are great, were just as great as the side effects that I was receiving. So that's
if you don't mind me asking, so what dosage of prednisone were you on before you went off?
My final dose was 5 milligrams, which is very low. Okay. They started me in the hospital on 500 milligrams. And then I tapered down over the first 6 months to a year, and then finally was on 5 milligrams up till last October.
And I think that varies quite a bit, just based upon my experience. I mean, I was on pretty heavy doses before my transplant. And the day after my transplant, I was on 5 milligrams, have been on 5 milligrams ever since then. I probably, like you said, it's kind of like I always tell my friends, when they ask me how I was doing, because they know you get a transplant, everybody thinks that's a cure for your disease and you're going to be great the next day, that you're taking all these drugs and your body's not used to it. And you're right, it's like a cocktail, and you have to kind of get the mix right to make sure your kidney's still working and that your body's able to deal with the side effects or deal with the drugs. I recently changed, I went off tacrolimus in March, and I'm on a once-a-month infusion called Bellicept, which is a treatment that requires you go in for an infusion once a month, but in theory, according to my doctors and nephrologists, could help extend the life of your kidney and is a little less caustic on your kidney and has fewer side effects. So if anybody's looking at that and needs information, I'd be happy to help you guys out. And there is a question in the box, do you have to take these drugs for the rest of your life? And the answer is yes. There are primarily most take at least 2 anti-rejection medications to help their body keep their kidney in check. It's the natural reaction from your body to kick out any enemy, foreign object that you put in, even though the kidney's good for you. It's your body's natural reaction to not want to take it, and that's why you need the immunosuppressants to help your body adjust.
I think the only way that would put us in a position to not have to take those medications anymore is if we could continue to properly fund research and testing for artificial kidneys or pluripotent stem cell kidneys that, you know, they're regenerating from stem cells that come from our stomach lining or our wisdom teeth to create it so that it matches your tissues. So those things are in the far future, but they are being worked on.
Yeah, and there is a program called Kidney X, which is sponsored by the government Health and Human Services Department, giving grants to people who, you know, have ideas either about transplantation, about dialysis, or right now the last grant they gave out was $500,000. So that's a great program, and it'll be an ongoing program as well.
They just awarded that like last week, didn't they? They did phase 2. They just came out with their award winners.
First one, yeah.
Also, just to plug Honor the Gift and the last week's advocacy, this is a great segue to go back into that, is be an informed kidney voter when you are voting. Honor the Gift is a program that is, they are trying to get this immune bill passed that is so that Medicare will cover your anti-rejection medication. Right now, they only cover it for 36 months. And then if you can't afford your medication after that, you're going to lose your kidney. Thank you, Gisela, for posting that. You're going to lose your kidney if you can't afford your medication and you can't take your medication. So this is to get the Medicare coverage for the life of that organ. So be an informed kidney voter. Just have to throw that out there.
About medicine. So just with medicine is that when you leave the hospital, you're going to leave with like a tote bag of drugs and like a huge, we call it a rattler. It has your Sunday through Saturday, and then it has about like 8 sections for each day. And it's like the size of your face, and it's very overwhelming. But when you graduate to a baby rattler, it feels very rewarding when you start taking less medicine. And then the other thing too is like there's a guide, you know you have to take these medicines for the rest of your life. And there's like a guide of when you can start to taper off or reintroduce other things, but it's a guide. So I think you get this booklet from the transplant clinic and it's like, okay, at 3 months I should stop. And then you're like still on it. You're like, why am I still on this? Why are you? And you freak out. And it's just every single person is different. You know, I'm on this one, I'm still taking my Selects. It's this antifungal tab. I still have to take it because it helps me absorb my medicine. And I am a 1.5 years post-transplant. Some people only take it for 3 months. I'm 1.5 years. When will I be able to stop it? Don't know, but it's not the worst medicine. You know, your body adjusts, similar to what Brandy said. And I think we could all adjust in the beginning. I can't imagine 500 milligrams of prednisone. You must have been a crazy person, like just feeling all the side effects. But you everything is new to you, and the medicine, there's like, you're not sure if it's a side effect or what you're feeling. I remember being really hot, like just like on fire, like sunburn all the time. I was not on steroids also post-transplant. I received my transplant at a facility that does not push prednisone on you post-transplant. After 3 months, they asked me if I would consider, my nephrologist asked me if I would consider going on prednisone because it has been shown in some studies that it may or may not. And I said, could we wait to see the results from my kidney biopsy? So you can always, again, talk to your doctor and make sure they know how you feel about what you're taking. And super, super important, you take these medicines for the rest of your life. You have a schedule. You can't cheat on the schedule. No good. It's not a maybe I'll take it, maybe I won't. We have about 8 alarms that go off. Your watch, the phone, Alexa, you know, your partner, whoever's in the house. It's a non-negotiable thing to take your medicine on time.
I agree. We do have a lot of talk in the chat box about Living Donor Protection Act, and just to give a quick plug, that's a very important piece of legislation. It's still in the current Congress, and it will provide protection for people who want to become living donors. It's hard enough to find a donor, or to try to find a donor. If there's too many roadblocks in the way for those people, they're not going to want to donate. And, you know, a couple of those roadblocks include the fact that currently they can be discriminated against by insurance companies for health insurance or life insurance. and they're not eligible for FMLA. So if they do come back to their job, they're not guaranteed that the job will still be there. And those are two big hurdles. And if the Living Donor Protection Act gets passed, then all that will go away. So we'll post some information on our website about that as well for those who want to contact their representatives to make sure that they're supporting it. Actually, Gisela just put it in the chat box now. We had a question about tacrolimus. Is everybody on the board still taking tacrolimus?
Yes, I am.
I am.
Gisela?
Tacro. Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So yes, everybody. That's an affirmative. Did anybody try to get a second opinion or get a second opinion before they had their transplant or before their kidneys started to fail?
I did not. I felt very confident with my nephrologist team. I did not get a second opinion.
I moved around a lot, and each time I moved, I found a new nephrologist. And by the time my transplant was performed, I had to have 3 different biopsies because they each wanted to individually confirm that it was IgA nephropathy.
That's pretty amazing.
So
anybody have any? Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry. I was just going to say
I
did just because I wasn't at that point when the labs were getting worse and worse with the high dose of prednisone. I was getting like disenchanted with my nephrologist at the time. So I wanted to just see, like I said in my story, if I could get a magic pill that would be instead of prednisone to fix everything. That's why I went to Penn. And unfortunately, he gave me the news that, well, it's too late. You already have, they've already pretty much failed. So.
Anybody have to make any lifestyle changes post-transplant?
Probably
Goodbye to sushi.
one of us.
Yeah, no sushi. Yeah, no sushi. Yeah, that's for sure. No sushi, no salad bars, right?
Yeah.
No sprouts, no grapefruit, no pomegranate.
No. Those are pretty minute in the scheme of things, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. No sleeping past 9 either.
On that transplant schedule.
From the time that you were told that you needed a transplant, from the time you actually were done with your testing, what was that timeline like for you guys?
I was a year and a half.
A year and a half from testing to approval, or a year and a half from testing to?
Oh no, it was I'm sorry, it was 3 months of testing, like to actually qualify. Yeah, it was 3 months of testing.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything different from that?
From the time that they had discovered that I was in end-stage renal failure and would need a transplant, it took a year and a half for my kidneys to fail enough to be listed, and then about 6 months for my donor to be approved.
Yeah, those 10 or 12 months or 17 months are tough, right? As you kind of go through the process of knowing where you're headed, but you're not there yet, right? You have to get to a certain number before they can put you on the list, and you kind of know you're headed in that direction. But when you're going to get there and when it's going to happen is it can disrupt your life quite a bit. Last, I guess we had on the list, if you could do one thing differently, what would it be?
For me, I would have done more research. Knowing what I know now, I would have done more research in the beginning when the first time I heard someone say this could be a real kidney disease, to actually do the research and really push to get an answer earlier than I did. That's what I would change.
I would have adhered to my medication regimen pre-transplant a lot better. I would have stuck to my ACE or ARB inhibitors and tried CellCept. I probably would have tried anything. It only took 14 years for me to require a transplant.
Gisela?
I think the one thing is I realized, like, over the years, I mean, I too was diagnosed very young and I wasn't being treated by anyone. And I thought that being naive about doctors that aren't nephrologists checking your kidney function I was very good about seeing my ENT, my regular general practitioner, my OBGYN, and you're doing blood work, you're doing urine, but they're not checking your kidney function, or if they see a flare up, they don't flag it. So like, who knows, if I was with a nephrologist, they might have caught something, and maybe I would have received some other sort of treatment prior, some sort of new drug regimen. So that for sure is something that I regret, not being under the care of a nephrologist sooner. And then I would also say, once I knew that I needed a transplant, being really loud and obnoxious about it.
Yeah.
Get loud, as they say. Get loud for your kidney. I would have gotten louder sooner.
Yeah, it's no time to be shy based upon my experience, I guess. I mean, even if it's not in your personality, people have to understand, that what you're going through, and that if you don't get it, I don't think everybody understands that if you don't get your transplant, you could die. And that's a really hard discussion to have with people. And, unless you have it, they're not going to learn what the consequences are, and it's going to be hard to find someone to get you a transplant.
Stuart, if I could add a little quick thing before we sign off. Today I was on the call with somebody who has been in the kidney space for years, had a transplant years and years ago, doing very well, but he's a consultant for a lot of pharmaceutical companies. There's a lot going on in the dialysis to transplant space. We're actually going to be, hopefully, Carrie and I had this conversation today, posting information on our new IgA nephropathy Facebook group, trials and research group, about this trial. But there's actually hope that immunosuppressants will not have to be used in the future. It's all done by stem cell, by the living donor. Most likely it would be a family person, because they're going to go through a little extra to give that stem cell to that patient that is on dialysis. But he also shared with me that there's a lot of hope in this area where there's never been hope. And it's always been a huge frustration to me. I always felt so helpless how do I help these patients on dialysis and transplant? So I could cry. He gave me a lot of hope in this. There's a lot of news that'll be forthcoming that I can't wait to share for everybody, but just know that we're actively working with these companies and want to get them on our site as soon as possible to give our patients hope, so you don't have to live with all these drugs.
Great, thanks, Bonnie. I think Lenny would like to say a few words to everybody. Lenny?
Lenny, I'll unmute you. Oh, you did it. Oh, there you go.
Am I good?
Yep.
You're good.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you. Hey, really, I just want to first and foremost, just say hello. And for the past 15 years, I've been working side by side with Ed and Bonnie. Just want to say it's a privilege and an honor to be associated, not only with them, but with everyone that's here on this call. It's amazing where we were, where we started, and where we're going and continue to go. So with the assistance of Carrie, Bonnie, Gisela, Stuart, and all the others that I'm not mentioning, just thank you. Because it's inspiring. It's amazing to hear the success stories, that the things that we're doing are working. The support that we have, the pharma companies that are sponsoring us, that are collaborating, that's critical. So again, for those of you who were not with us 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 10 years ago, it's amazing where we are and where we continue to grow. So I just want to say thank you. And I think it's more than just saying that there's hope, it's reality. So if we continue to do what we're doing, and if everyone continues to participate and add value, it just makes us that much more powerful. So again, congratulations to all. And this is just, it's very enlightening. It's great.
Great, thanks so much, Lenny. Thank you for everybody who participated in the panel. For those of you who are watching on the webinar, I think it really shows you the value of being involved in the IgA Foundation, that there's a sense of community, that you're not alone. And speaking on, from my own experiences, I think one of the events that really changed my life was, almost a year ago today, I attended the externally led patient-focused drug development in Washington, D.C., or outside Washington. I met Bonnie, I met Carrie, I met Gisela. I really found like I was part of a community, and to know, and really up until then, you know, I never really met anybody that had IgA nephropathy, and to see all these other people that had my disease and knew what it was like to live with it, really made me feel a lot better and made me feel a lot more at ease. And I consider myself really lucky to be able to work with these guys and to help the foundation out. So for those of you who are watching, if you want to volunteer or you want to help out, by all means, contact one of us and we'd be happy to put you to work. Next week, we're going to talk about thriving through food. We hope you can join us for that. You can look at, sign up and register at www.igan.org/SPARK 2020. And we hope to see everybody next week. Thanks, everybody, for